Hi everyone, it's me Arden Lee. I am back with another video, and today's topic is another topic request from one of the members of the Repatterning Parlor, which is the free Facebook group that I moderate. So come join us if you haven't already. And the question is, how do you know when to take some space from a friendship versus when do you end that friendship? This is a great question, and I'm excited to dive into it. Before I do, I'd love to remind everyone that I am currently enrolling for the winter 2020 session of the Repatterning Project. So if you are enjoying these videos, if you're liking the content, if they're helpful to you, and you feel like you might be ready to do that full deep dive into the full 8-week process, the 8-week container, do reach out to me, shoot me a PM, and let's chat and let's see if now is the right time for you to do the full comprehensive version of this work that has helped so many people transform their lives and repattern themselves from their trauma imprints, their formative relationships, early childhood rearing, and social conditioning, right? All of these external factors that create internal systems within us that maybe unconsciously operate in a way that is not necessarily serving our highest good. We want to call our power back and start creating our lives from a place of sovereignty, from a place of understanding our needs and boundaries, communicating them, and being able to discern away from what isn't working for us and create lives that we really love by leaning into that energy of the things that we really love and enjoy and want to create more of. So definitely reach out to me if that sounds like your jam. And now let's talk a bit about, obviously this is a relevant topic, right? How do you know when you should just take some space from a friendship and when it looks like you need to end things? What's really interesting, as I was just saying that, I had a memory come up. This is going to sound kind of weirdly, this is going to be a weird way to introduce this topic. But I just remembered years ago, when I was in the BDSM scene, I asked a question on a panel. I was a newbie pro-dom who is a lifestyle submissive, and I asked, the panel was on the topic of extreme dominance, my way or the highway, right? We have these relationships where we're having like these extreme methods of power control out of choice, hopefully, and although that's a tricky consideration too, which I won't get into in this video. But the person answered, I asked this question and I said, what do you do if it's my way or the highway, but someone still isn't listening to you? I was a newbie pro-dom, and I was having some trouble with some clients, who were maybe paying for me to dominate them, but somehow rebelling against my authority at the same time. And this person said, my collar can be taken away. As a dominant, they were talking about giving their collar to a submissive. My collar can be taken away and it can be given back. So as long as you're adhering to my rules, you can have it and you can wear my collar. The minute you're not, then we have an issue. You're no longer in this service relationship. But it can be flexible. So it comes up as I'm thinking of this very strange memory, right? But one of the things that I say a lot in terms of discerning about our personal boundaries is that when we understand our needs and our boundaries, then they don't become personal anymore, right? It's, you must be this tall to ride. If you're this tall, if you are meeting the baseline minimum standards that I need, that only I can determine what are right for me, right? Only you can make that decision of what your baseline needs and boundaries are, what your baseline standards are for the relationship or friendship. As long as you're meeting those, then cool, we're friends. If you're not, then I'm going to have a conversation with you. And I'm going to bring up what's happening and how it's making me feel and what I need to be addressed in the relationship. When I decide I need to take some space from a friendship is typically when that conversation can't be received at that time. When that person goes into a defensive mode and says, well, what about you? You did blah, blah, blah. And, sure, maybe I want to examine myself, right? We're none of us blameless in these situations. But if someone is not hearing me And if someone is going on the defensive and not creating a productive conversation about it and isn't capable of hearing what's going on for me, holding space for it, accepting it, integrating it without immediately going on the defensive, and making the necessary adjustments to find a solution that works for both of us, then that's when I'm going to back off. Typically, when I give space to a friendship is when I say, you know what, you might not be in a position to hear this right now. This is becoming too heated, and I'm not going to do this. I'm not going to have this conversation this way. Let's talk about it when we're both a little less activated. I was going to say emotional, but no, activated, right? There's nothing wrong with our emotions, but if we allow ourselves to get into that place where our bodies are flooded with adrenaline and we're going on the defensive, then it's probably not a good time to have that conversation. And it's natural that many of our friends who maybe aren't doing the same work that we're doing and get activated in conversations such as those surrounding needs and boundaries and conflict resolution, which can sometimes be difficult for people, understandably, then that's when we want to back off and say, you know what, I'm going to take some space. Let's both think about this. I'd like you to give some time and some consideration to the things I brought up today, and we'll check in a few weeks. That's when you give space to something. If over time there's no space for that conversation, if you return to it a few weeks later and they're still acting defensive and there's no progress being made, then it's interesting. When do you end the friendship versus when do you just take space from it? If we go by the metaphor of the collar and the DS relationship, the dominant submissive relationship that I used in the metaphor that I sort of opened up this discussion with, then there's almost never any need to end a friendship. You just take the space for as long as you need until the adjustment is made. It's like saying this 7-year-old is banned from riding this roller coaster forever because they don't meet the height requirement. We can get to a point where there is space for anyone to redeem themselves and create a healthy relationship with us. That said, I don't want to skip to that too quickly, because for many of us who are trained with people-pleasing impulses and poor boundaries and fawn responses, we may not actually take enough space, and we may actually, in thinking that, okay, well, there's always possible room for future redemption, we may actually keep that cord and instead of taking enough space that we need to distance ourselves from the friendship in a way that protects our boundaries and keeps us healthy. So if you're at a point where you're not secure in your boundaries yet, and you have a tendency or a habit to keep those connections going, then I want to come back to that rhetoric of yes, end the friendship. Because if that's what you need to do to protect yourself and your boundaries and your energy, then absolutely. When you get to a place where you have stronger boundaries, then it is just about the distance or the lack thereof, right? I hold you here if you're not respecting my boundaries and my energy and my needs. You can come back when you are. The problem with not having strong boundaries in the first place is that people will sometimes manipulate or find ways of coming back in even when they haven't changed. What you really need to do to let that person back in is to see that they've heard you, they've understood you, they've integrated what that you've said, and they're making adjustments. Not only willing to make adjustments, but they are making them. Maybe they're not perfect at first, but you have to see that they're doing the thing that they said they would do when they heard what your boundaries and standards were. So that's the sort of paradox with this, right? When we get to a place where we have really strong, healthy boundaries, then we don't ever really need to end anything. It's always, well, come back when you're this tall to ride. But if you're worried that your boundaries may have some leaks in them, some weak points in which people can manipulate you back into that friendship without having made those changes, then end the friendship. And I'll also say that when we do have strong boundaries, we don't need to explain ourselves about why we're ending a friendship. It's not, oh, we're ghosting and that person never knew what happened. It's that we've stated our boundaries. We've said why it isn't working. And then we're like, this still isn't working. I'm sorry. Goodbye. Right? But I want to tune into that key difference. If you're worried about getting sucked back in, then yes, make a cold turkey, right? Draw a hard line for yourself to protect your energy from leaking out. If you're already confident in your boundaries, in your ability to uphold your boundaries and not be manipulated out of them, and that takes time and practice, so it's all about where everyone is at on their journey. There's no right or wrong answer. There's just the place that we want to get to, the place that we want to point ourselves toward. And if you're not in a place where you have strong boundaries yet, then yes, you do want to protect yourself from those leaks. And if drawing that hard line and saying this friendship is over is what you need to do, then absolutely do that to protect yourself. So hopefully that makes sense. In summation, taking space from a friendship means I've given you feedback, I've shown you what I need to change, and it's not happening right now because we're both kind of activated about it, so let's take some space and we'll revisit it later. Ending a friendship is, I've told you multiple times, you're still activated about it, or you apologize and say you'll make changes, but then they never happen, and I'm not seeing any adjustments on your part, and no matter what I do, this connection is still being dragged into an energy that isn't healthy for me, that I don't want, and I'm going to end the friendship. And when you get to that place where you have strong boundaries, then nothing ever really needs to end or begin. It's just what is in alignment with you is something that you will accept, and what is not in alignment with you is something that you have a boundary against that is strong enough that you can't be manipulated into compromising it. So those are sort of the stages of how that goes. Hopefully that was clear, and hopefully it was helpful. Thank you guys for listening, and hopefully I'll see some of you in the container for the repatterning project starting January 26th. So go ahead and reach out to me. I'd love to chat with you about whether it's the right time. I'll see you soon.